Hi everybody. Today we're going to talk about China and some of the myths around China. Around the globe, people are divided on their opinions on China, and this is no different in South Africa. We are joined by Li-Heng Du from Prescient Investment Management. Li-Heng was born in Shanghai, spent a few years in South Africa, and is now back in Shanghai, responsible for all investments in China for Prescient. Welcome, Li-Heng.
Thank you, Nadine. Very good to see you.
Let's start with one of the familiar pictures that we all have on China, and that's one of a big city, no blue skies visible, most of the people wearing masks, and at that point in time it was definitely not for the virus. And yet you see statements in the press like Beijing is winning the clean race. What is it like living in Shanghai? And I think more importantly, what is the government's outlook and view on going green? Because we need China to actually be on board in terms of the green energy theme.
Great question. I think personally, living in mainland China, even the last 4 to 5 years, we've seen a massive transformation of the entire city. I think as a Chinese person who left China 30 years ago, I went back to China about every 5 years. And I think the pictures of that grey city, the smoke-filled city, the congested place, was extremely true all the way, I would say, even to the mid-2000s. So if you look at 2005, 2007, even to about 2010, that's when probably emissions and pollutions absolutely peaked in China. Since then, China's already, I always use an example, if you have a kid and you're teaching a child to do something, when they're too young and try to force something, it takes them forever to learn, and they just cannot learn it well. However, a few months later, you'll find all of a sudden they can pick up these skills very, very easily. And I think that's what happened in China with green. As the entire population got wealthier, the people are demanding a higher level of living standard, a better life. And from about the late 2010s, I would say, early 2011, 2012, China has gone on a massive green scale. So from the first side, just living in a city like Shanghai of 30 million people, there's some massive transformation we've seen in the city. So for example, today, 40% of the city has to go green. So this means that every project they approve, every housing development, everything, 40% of the land area has to be green, planted with trees, right? So the entire city has went from a concrete jungle to pretty much tree-lined everywhere. Number two, one of the biggest things that came through hilariously was, of course, recycling and sorting of garbage. In China, things happen suddenly. So one day we woke up, there was a notice on the building, you're going to get a fine, and everyone had to sort their garbage. And that's just how it is. That's just something that they've decided. On the back of that, one of the big things people talk about is 5G technology. And one of the things you don't realize, one thing that's very interesting to us, is that they showcase the technology of having, so China is a river delta, it has hundreds of small estuaries. And historically, all of these things are massively polluted. And you have these 5G automated river cleaning little drones and river cleaning little rafts that basically decide where they go, where they pick up where the pollution is, and where they go and clean up. So even as a citizen living on the ground, I can say very, very certainly that the air is getting cleaner every single year, the streets are getting cleaner, the city is getting more green. We have a full-on electric vehicle number plate system. So for example, in China, if you want to buy a car, it costs you now close to 250,000 Rand just to get a number plate. But if you buy an electric car, you get a free number plate. So there's all these policies that supports China going green. Now, if you're looking at it from a top level, certain things you want to know about. China is a world leader in green investments. China is a world leader in wind capacity. China is a world leader in solar capacity. Over the last 2 decades, China is responsible for 25% of the increase of greenery in the whole world, so with 6% of the land mass. So on aggregate, we planted about 60 billion trees, 400% more than any other country around the world. And China is already, on a government level, have decided that by 2030, they will peak emission, and by 2060, they're going to be carbon neutral. So I always say, if you look at American policy, going from Trump to Biden to AOC to talking about the Green New Deal, et cetera, well, China's decided on that decision on a Chinese level, and they're going to do it. So we are implementing it. We could be phase by phase by phase. The current administration, President Xi Jinping, says green and nature is the biggest treasure of China. And I think even the population now will no longer tolerate pollution, will no longer tolerate all of these things. So I think from that side, that's really good to see that China at least have already made a decision and are going in the right direction, are going green.
Thanks, Liang. I think the next one I want to touch on is this perception that we cannot trust the numbers coming from China. They're cooking the books to make the growth look stronger. What is your views on that?
So we've looked at it extensively, and like every emerging market, statistic collection, especially in a country as large as China, has its issues. So it's not that every single number is great. Most numbers are very, very good. So what's really, really good to see is we have the National Statistics Bureau. So they came out with new laws of actually punishing officials for sending fake numbers. So one of the big issues they've had historically is on a provincial level, people want to get promotions. So they're incentivized to lie about the numbers. And then on the national level, the national statisticians have to make adjustments for that. So that's one of the big issues historically they've had. And what really changed that was actually the Premier Li Keqiang. Historically, he was the one that actually told everyone, look, the numbers, you just can't believe. On a national level, they know the numbers coming from the provinces aren't right, and they made adjustments for it. But this is also something that's been happening 20 years ago, 15 years ago. In the last few years, massive dramatic improvement has occurred all around the place. And the numbers today that you see in China are far higher quality than what you've seen before. I think the second thing I think is always quite ironic to me that, look, if everything in China is fake and the economy is much smaller than we think it is, and all of that was true, then the US would be far less worried about the rise of China, right? So you can't have both being the case, that China is this giant, strong monster that you have to fight China and China's going to win. And at the same time, while we're lying and we're not really winning, we're a very small economy. So I think that's what you're seeing. I think every research that we've actually seen that GDP collection is a very, very difficult thing. What counts as GDP, right? You hire a maid to clean your house, that's GDP. When your wife does it, it's not. So these are fundamental issues of GDP collection. The Chinese GDP collection method is geared toward factories and production manufacturing. As we all know, China has moved towards services on a massive scale. So all else equal, I think there's very little credible evidence that the Chinese economy is materially smaller than what it claims to be. So that's the only thing I can say around the Chinese numbers on GDP. I think the financial numbers, I think the same theme. Historically, there's massive problems. So the 1990s, 1980s, massive problems, bad accounting standards, lots of scandals. And the growth and maturity of the Chinese financial market that's occurred over the last decades has been astounding. We have global IFRS accounting standards, the regulations continue being changed. I think fraud happens around the world. We have Steinhoff in South Africa, we have Wirecard in Germany, all huge companies in the DAX that have fraud, and China's no exception. There are cases of fraud in China. However, the idea that's widespread fraud or it's encouraged, I think that's long gone. The regulators here are in fact very, very strict, and year by year are handing out much larger fines, investigating, sending people to jail, etc. So I think as an emerging market, it's not at a developed market standard, but compared to any other country with similar, let's say, GDP per capita levels, by every measure, China typically are actually ahead.
Thank you. Liang, then just move on to, I think, something else that a lot of our clients are familiar with, the fact that China is well known for made in China and the products are cheap and of poor quality. Is this true? Is that changing in China?
Nadine, I think, once again, it is one of the things that's changing on a big scale. So that's definitely true 20 years ago. And I think forever and ever, the one thing that will never change is that things made in China will be cheap. But do not confuse cheap with poor quality. I think that, to me, is the biggest thing that's been changing. I think China, the industrial, moving from South Africa to China, really starts blowing your mind on the efficiencies of infrastructure and the industrial scale that can be achieved in China. That's not possible to replicate anywhere in the world. And what I mean by that is that China has an entire ecosystem, entire industrial infrastructure that is in place, that anything can be shipped anywhere within one day at pretty much free pricing, right? That's the thing that's astounding in China. It's why everything works, everything's so cheap. You just cannot beat the manufacturing scale. And with 1.6 billion people, what you can do is can build for economies of scale. So I always use example where Germany or Japan may invent something for the elite. China is a place that brings it to the masses. And that doesn't matter anything. So even things like iPhones, TVs, everything is actually bought in China. And if China only made cheap and poor quality things, we wouldn't be able to sell so much of it. So I think there's certainly a level of value for money there. I think what's astounding living in China is that how the quality has gotten so high that even as a Western consumer, someone like myself, who's into all the international brands, the thing that really shocked me after moving to China is how much I've gone to buying Chinese. And what we found is that, historically China copied, but with the invention of the modern age and the Internet of Things, I think China almost skipped a generation. Everything is smart, everything's connected to the Internet, everything is automated, everything has LED screens. And I think that to me is very, very impressive. And the innovation is only going to continue. So I think patents, for example, where 5 years ago China was nowhere in patent registration, today is one of the countries with the biggest patent registration in the world. China has some of the biggest R&D budget in the world. So certainly I think just as the transformation of Japan going from low quality to high quality, China is making the same transformation in almost every single area. And I think in a way it's also very, very lucky that it has this massive population in a small land mass, which allows it to reach economies of scale that you just cannot reach in any other country. And as such, you'll be able to be the cheapest manufacturer in the world. And I think that's going to be difficult to replicate anywhere in the world.
Thank you. That's very insightful. Can you perhaps give us your thoughts on China as an investment case for South African investors?
Sure. I think when we started the fund, one of the crucial things what we thought of that was unique to China, something that really excites us, is that anyone who invests, you want very, very high real returns, and you get high real returns by doing two things right. You want to buy a market that over the long term gives you good returns, and on top of that, you want to be able to generate alpha. So if you can do both of those things well, you'll get very, very high returns. And I think China is such a unique market and so misunderstood for so long that it's a great opportunity. And one of the first things is that it's actually a reasonably hard currency. So it's not like any other emerging markets. It's actually the RMB is quite a hard currency. It's a finished goods exporter. China recently issued 5-year Euro bonds at a negative interest rate. Now think about that. It's China going to Europe, raising government bonds at a negative interest rate. You're borrowing euros and people are paying you to borrow euros. So that's, from the South African investor perspective, that's very attractive, right? Because you're not buying another yen, you're not buying in Argentina, you're not buying in India, you're buying another hard currency. The second thing for us that's really great is that the financial market in China is actually very young. So unlike even the South African stock market, has over 100 years of history. The Chinese stock market started in 1995, essentially, the modern version. All these China's capital market is opening up to the world. It's been happening at an increasing pace, and actually really only happened over the last 5 to 10 years. It used to be something that no one invested, becoming more and more common. So what you're seeing with the combination of the two is that you have a strong country with strong fundamentals, with good growth dynamics, with a good debt situation. It's handled the coronavirus very, very well. The hard currency, and at the same time, in a world where valuation has gone crazy, you can buy essentially kind of a quasi-developed market at emerging market prices. I think that's very exciting to us. And on top of that, you get the opportunity that if you know what you're doing in China, there's opportunity to add alpha. So that's why we think for us, over the very, very long term, it just seems to be such a great portfolio where you can just buy and forget about it and see the results accumulate over 5 or 10 years by investing in China.
Thanks, Lihen. And with those comments, we're going to end the recording for today. Really appreciate your time with us.
Thank you, Nadine.